Welcome to the city, Mastermind City. Hi, I'm Faye Chappell.
And I'm Stacey Maynard. Join us for a vibrant, inspiring, and uplifting master talk as we focus on how you can make a lasting impact on a global scale. Because the truth is, we're here because we want you to win.
So are you ready to surround yourself with success? Because you're in the right place. Welcome to the city.
Video didn't kill the radio
It
star.
didn't. Radio just changed.
Exactly, and it's turned into podcasting.
Yay. That's great.
Because when that song was written, it was literally, we used to listen to music and everything on the radio. And then video took over. Did you watch any of those old video shows and Friday night videos?
MTV and all that stuff? Absolutely.
Addicted.
Yeah, addicted. You would wait for the rotation for your song to come on again.
Yeah. Or Friday night videos, the top. And I have them on a VHS tape. That shows how old I am.
Yikes.
So yes, video. And then it was weird though, because now it seems like we're going back to the original radio. People are now listening to audio information.
Yeah, well, I think everyone, realizes that they can hear it. They can do things any way they want now, right? So it's great, especially when you're in the car, you download some podcasts, driving up to the cottage. Sometimes you lose signals and stuff, but you still got your podcasts if you downloaded them.
Well, one of the things, probably the number one thing that I would say that is why you should podcast is that it's the only medium that is activity independent.
Right.
So people are listening to podcasts in their car, like you just said, going up to the cottage, working out, going for a walk. You don't have to be watching anything, which I love.
Yeah, me too. It is great. It's a great opportunity. And I think there's so many, and people have no idea even the volume out there of information. A lot of it's not great and a lot of it's great. Depends on what you're looking for, I guess.
Well, it was actually funny. Yesterday I went to, because I'm trying to find this way to sleep, and I went on my podcast because there's so much. But then they linked me to this new app that I didn't know existed. And now I've downloaded this app and I was listening to it last night. So I was really excited.
Oh, great.
I learned all from podcasts. Yeah. But it's interesting, even though there's so many out there, the latest statistic on how many shows there are, there's only 1 million.
Oh, is that all? Just 1 million shows?
Well, I know that sounds like a high number, but if you think about the fact that Facebook has 1 billion accounts and all of these social media networks are, millions and millions and millions for only 1 million. And it only just went up because last year there was only 800,000. Yeah. So that's not a lot of shows.
Why do you think that is?
I think because people don't realize, number one, that they can have a show.
Right.
Because they think, iTunes is going to control that and they're only approving certain things, but you can have a show.
Exactly.
You can have a show.
Exactly. That's the beauty of it. And it's such a low cost of entry, right? So low cost.
Well, I mean, literally it can be free. Yeah. There's some add-ons and stuff like that, but it literally can be free. And one of the other statistics that I was looking at all of them this morning, but one of the ones that I love the most is the fact that podcast listeners, and you can attest to this, are active on social media.
Yeah.
So if you listen to a show and you really like the host, what's the first thing you're going to do?
Right. Going to go check them out.
Exactly, on social. So that really drives a lot of traffic. So today in our master podcasting, I just want to go through kind of the basics to start people thinking about it.
Right.
But the first question that I want to ask you is, why did you start your show?
That's a good reason. So I like to say it was like this brilliant plan. The truth is, we started talking about it. I talked about doing a podcast, and I was talking about just like what we do today, which is, do something to add value to, I was mastering something, and I thought of all of that. And the truth was, it just didn't sound like a lot of fun to me. And, I don't do things unless I actually enjoy them. So I was like, I really loved the concept of having a chat, but I just wanted to talk about things that I wanted to talk about that would add value, but they weren't exactly, they might not be everyone's, cup of tea, and it's okay. And I think when you do podcasting, it can broaden what you talk about. You feel a little more free. And I still, obviously, it's part of getting more followers, integrating into your social media, letting people get to know you, which is really what my podcast is about. It's that it is who I am. So there's no like, in between on that.
Yes, it's a great way, but podcast listeners are really loyal. And I think that's the interesting thing too, is they get to know you, but you're also tapping into a whole pot of people.
And you never know, right? Like that's the weird thing. You don't know who's like I got messages from people that I know, but I had no idea they were listening to my podcast.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So to give some basics, so there's different types of podcasts. So number one, anyone can have a show. There's no barriers. There's not even financial unless you want to sort of go up level. But there really isn't any barriers to accessing podcasting platforms, hosting. It's very easy to get it up on iTunes now. It takes time, but it does not take any sort of resources. So things to think about ahead of time. And we'll talk about why you named your show what you did after. But so think about the types of podcasts you listen to. So my biggest advice before you start a podcast is to listen to them. Listen to podcasts, find out what type you like to listen to. So there's the solo podcast. So some of mine are just me chatting away about whatever topic around business or LinkedIn or whatever my topic of choice of the day is. But then there is the guest podcast, which is very typical. I find this one probably the most popular. So I'm going to be the host of my show, and I'm going to continue to interview guests on every episode. And the advantage of that one, obviously, you get them to share the episode too when it goes live, which is really cool.
Can I just interject something here on that note?
Absolutely.
If you're going to interview people, make sure it's because you're interested in interviewing people, not because you think it might be a good show, because you can really tell when somebody is just interviewing a person, but they're not really interested.
Yes, absolutely.
So, if that's a show you want to do it because you have a curiosity and not because you think it'll do well. Okay, go ahead.
Absolutely. And not just because you want their stuff, like you have access to their network. I would say one of the interesting things, just talking about the interview model. So I do have guests on my show periodically, but I don't do it as an interview. I actually don't send out questions ahead of time because I don't want those canned responses and those scripted answers.
Right.
And I actually had someone decide not to be on my show, even though we had agreed on a time to record, because I wasn't sending her those questions ahead of time.
That's amazing.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So
you can also have co-hosted. So two people. Obviously either having a conversation. Sometimes I feel like even though I'm Faye's producer, I also get to be part of her show on a regular basis, which is really cool. My failed podcast, which is the one I learned the most on. You learn more from failure than you do from
absolutely. Absolutely.
It was co-hosted. So the two of us decided, but there was a lot of challenges in regards to how we structured it, and we didn't do it well. So I learned so much from that, but it was co-host. It was me and another gentleman, and we would basically debate topics. And that was sort of our show. And we thought it was going to be great. But what got in the way was consistency.
Right.
Our schedules wouldn't match up. Our once a week podcast turned into twice a month, which turned into once a month, which turned into, remember that podcast we used to do?
Exactly.
So consistency is key, but also the length.
Right.
Both of us listen to shorter, meaning sort of under half an hour episodes, but there are some that are like an hour to an hour and a half to 2 hours.
Yeah.
If I see that a podcast 2 hours, I'm out.
It's hard. It's just like, it's no different than if you're watching a video on your laptop or free training. There's a point that you lose people. And if any of you have taught even live workshops and that, you have to give that. The reason you get so many breaks, people always go, why do I get so many breaks? I keep wanting to learn. No, because you lose, your attention span's gone. So same thing with podcasts.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to also think, if I'm driving for a couple of hours, maybe I can invest in a little bit of a longer show, but I'd also rather binge on, say, 4 or 5 ones. But that's my preference.
Right.
Typically, I recommend if you enjoy shorter episodes, you'll probably enjoy recording
Right.
certain ones. And if you enjoy the longer and more 45 minutes to an hour, then maybe that's the length of show that you should have. So things to consider, because I find what a lot of people do is they dive right into the tech.
Right.
What microphone should I have? What paper should I have? Make sure you don't hit it.
Yeah.
What do I need? How do I set up my studio? Do I need a soundboard? And they dive too far into that world. But really, you need to plan it first.
Yep.
So I had a guy reach out to me, and he goes, "I need you to help me." And I said, "You're not ready.
Right.
You don't even know what you're talking about. You don't know what kind of show you want. Well, you don't know what kind of length. You haven't started. You haven't done anything."
Right, and that's number one.
Yeah, exactly. So Anthea is just saying that she listens to podcasts daily, and there are only a couple that would go more than 30 minutes. So there you go, Anthea. That's probably the length of time that you will enjoy recording your episode.
Yeah,
as well.
And you'll know right away. I mean, it's a fascinating thing, because some people think that, oh my God, I'm going to love this. And then, they buy all the stuff, like you said, they get all the tech and they buy the expensive stuff, and they sit down, and then nothing comes out of their mouth because they realize that's not really their method of communication.
Exactly. So even though, so I always tell people, do the tech last.
Yeah.
You're fine. Do the thought process, do the strategy around launching your podcast. Think about, the type of people, if you're going to have guests, what kind of guests do you want on?
Right.
But one of the things you need to think about, and here's my question to you, Faye, is the name of your podcast.
Yeah. So it comes back to, before you name it, though, it comes back to the strategy of what you're doing, right? And why you're doing it. And so, on the same lines, before I answer that, I like to tell everyone to make sure, this is what I would do. Grab a microphone or a hairbrush or anything you want.
A pen.
And just start talking like you were doing a podcast. If you can't talk more than a minute or two, you're probably not ready. So, before you even think that this is what I want to do, really pretend test, right? Pretend test it out and say, okay, is this what I want to do? So the name of my podcast. So, it's called Call Me Casey. And that's my name. My actual maiden name was Kezia. And I have a friend that always calls me Casey from that. And I've never really had this big burning, recognition of my name or Faye or any of that stuff. I've just it's never felt right. But when he calls me Casey, I always, just for some reason, I like it. Why? Because it allows me some type of freedom outside of who I am traditionally, right? So I feel like I can talk about anything I want on my show, and that's why it was just simple, Call Me Casey. I wasn't trying to, I said to Stacey straight out, I'm not trying to get to the top 10. It wasn't my goal. My goal was to have fun, chat, have people, gain some value. And I will tell you, and that what was great for me was when I got feedback and people said, they actually texted me and they would say, I listened to your podcast, really helped me that day because I was feeling like that. And then I felt better. And I was just like, that's what it's about, right? That was it. There was nothing to sell. It was just, that's what it was about. So you have to have a purpose, right? And so the name of my podcast fits in with what I do. How about yours, Stacey?
Well, I mean, there's things, because a lot of people go, well, should I have it the Faye Chappell Show, or should it be the Stacey Maynard Show? And what does that look like? And my failed podcast, we thought we had a whole brand around it. We had envisioned, stage shows and, networks hiring us and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like,
yeah.
So my show is called Link for Success, and it originally started with the link for LinkedIn because I was talking about that topic. And as I started having guests on, and as I was having conversations with people around what does Link for Success mean to them, it was interesting to see their perspective on how wide of a range of topics that sort of fell into that category, from business to building relationships and social. And there's just so much that kind of fits into that topic. So I kept it broad enough to make sure that whatever topic that I wanted to talk about would fit into that. So,
and so you can see there was a difference between our shows, everyone, right? There's a difference. And that's the whole key, is understanding your voice. You have to find your voice. And I don't mean, your projection that you're well hydrated. I just mean, like, what do you really want to talk about? And I think a lot of the times, part of finding your voice is to understand what you listen to. Right?
Exactly.
So I would assume that Stacy listens to very different podcasts than me.
Probably.
Right?
But you know what? I mean, so there's lots to consider, because I know a lot of people that do it on topic, right? On the topic that they want to bring in or whatever. But you have to be careful with that, because you don't want to necessarily be pigeonholed into that. But you also need to make it match your brand and all of that stuff. And I'm just going to use Anthea as an example, because I know she's on right now.
Yeah.
And so hi, Anthea. So she could go two ways. She could be the Anthea Mumby Show. She could talk about, she's also insurance. So could she use the word insurance in the title? Is that word fun?
Yeah.
But she also has another aspect to her business. And she could talk about, some sort of dream team or some, so it's interesting how you can use taglines as well.
Yeah.
So there's so much that you can bring in. So I think the branding of it and thinking about what are you going to talk about, start to practice. I know one of the pieces of advice that Faye gave to somebody when they were trying to come up with the show is write down like 50 things you could talk about. And see if there's a theme, see if there's different words in there that make sense in regards to your show, because you need a name before you can do the artwork. And you need the concept of the show, and you need the idea list before you can have a name. So this is where there's a lot to do before you invest in any sort of equipment or any sort of platform. It doesn't matter yet. You're not there yet.
The truth is, Stacy, don't you think the tech and getting on is a heck of a lot easier?
Right? Because then you've got all this, like you said, you've got all this really cool equipment, and then you press record and it's going to sound awesome.
But what are you going to say? I think people make the mistake of, so whoever's joining us today, we told you we're going to teach you how to podcast, right? Which is true. That's what we're teaching you. But truth be told, the number one thing is, what the heck are you going to talk about? Everybody wants it to be wants to do a podcast. I don't know anyone who doesn't.
Yeah. And you know what? Everybody wants to do a video. Right. But again, it doesn't matter if you've got the coolest equipment and the best lighting and the best mic. As soon as you press record, you're like,
right.
Stop.
So you really have to, number one, is understand your personal brand, like what your voice is, determine what your voice is before you actually go to the next step, which is really understanding how you're going to go about sharing that voice, and then looking at it. Okay, well, what does that voice look like on a podcast, on a stage, whatever it is? It's the same thing. It's still your brand. So I don't feel any differently about Call Me Casey than if I was standing up on stage, but my brand is that I don't change. My brand is my brand. I just talk about whatever I want to talk about. So there is no, misrepresentation where I go. So if you're going to, there's nothing wrong with, use example of, her personal brand and her insurance brand and their team brand. There's nothing wrong with having all those three brands, but as long as you're not like hiding one, right? As long as it's out in the open and all those segments are part of you, makes sense.
Absolutely. And in speaking of, the question, is it appropriate to share the same content on a podcast that you would in other ways? And my answer is absolutely, because people consume information in different ways. So the person that you're going to reach with the podcast who's audio only while they're going for a walk might be very different than the one who wants to read an ebook. Maybe they want to scan information versus the one that wants to see you in action and who's willing to kind of, give you their time to watch a video, which is different than the kind of person that maybe they need small snippets of information, which you can share over social media or break it up into different blogs. So there's so many ways that you can share information, and podcasting is one of them. But absolutely reduce, reuse, recycle, rinse and repeat, whatever.
And so you guys know, you'll see that Stacy and I both do, we do posts now on Sundays called Podcast Sundays. And we post either our something about our podcast or someone else's. And that, is shared into social media. Sometimes we put it into a blog. It's the same thing. piece of the podcast can be part of your description in an Instagram post, in a Facebook post. So many things you can do, because the cool thing is you can upload your podcast, right? Do it all, and then download the transcript, and then use those written words because you've already said them.
Yeah, exactly. And use those into a blog or something along those lines. So Carolyn, I agree. Feel comfortable with your opinion and your view. And this is where that is very, very true, because I think a lot of people, when they hit record, they're very guarded in regards to what they're saying. So you have to be willing to put yourself out there, which is why you need to do all of these steps ahead of time. Think about your brand. Think about what you're going to talk about. Again, the only visual piece with a podcast is your album art.
Yeah.
And that can either be created by a graphic designer, but again, they need to know your concept.
Yeah.
They need to understand the feel. Like, is it going to be, you running because you're talking about something super high energy, or maybe it's you sitting back and being more calm because it's, maybe the topic is around meditation.
Right.
Or what's the theme? I mean, the feel of that image, because if you think about looking on iTunes and you see all those thumbnails, which one relates to you visually? So you need to speak to that audience as well.
And it can't be too busy because it's only this big on your phone.
I always laugh because I saw one, and I'm part of like 1,000 different podcast Facebook groups, and they'd be like, what one do you want? And one's like really simple and clean, and the other one has 1,000 words on it. And I'm like, who do you think's reading that?
Yeah, exactly.
So these are also basically the things to consider. Again, the type of show you're going to have. Are you going to have guests on it? What's the name of your show? How long do you want it to be? The branding of it, the podcast, like I said, the podcast art is one of them. But also think about your listeners. So a lot of times we think, well, I'm going to be the star of my show, and I'm so awesome, and it's going to be all about me.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. The listener is the star of your show. We need to understand who you want as a listener as well, because obviously the podcast that Faye listens to, it might be a little bit different than the one that I listen to.
Yeah.
So who do you want to attract with your listeners? And it's been really fun. The different customers I have, they're very different.
Totally.
Right. So it's so fascinating to see, one who I'm like, I wouldn't be their listener.
Right.
But their shows are fascinating.
Yeah.
They get a huge response for their audience.
Absolutely. And that's what you have to think about, right? And sometimes, like I said, you don't really know. Sometimes you'd be surprised how many people are listening to you.
Absolutely. But think about, so when you're thinking again about topics, so all of that know your audience stuff applies here in understanding who you want as a listener. So I know that, so that's a lot of planning. So you want to get into the planning.
Yeah.
Then you can get into equipment. So we're going to talk about one really cool thing I have for you tomorrow in the Tech Tuesday. But basically the whole concept is really you only need your phone.
Yeah.
You can do it with just your phone.
You can. There's no excuses.
There's none. So you can have your phone, the earpiece that goes with your phone that you got with your phone. You can record with that onto your phone, upload it to a podcasting app from your phone, and you can be live and have a podcast. There is no technological equipment excuses.
Right.
Nothing holds you back. Does everybody here have a phone? Yes. Don't go get one.
Yeah.
However, if you want to, up level, I do it on my computer. And yes, I have a mic, as does Faye. We have a mic, and this little foamy thing on the front is called a pop filter, and it just helps reduce some of the when you're talking. Super cheap. It's like $5.
Yeah.
Or something like that. So you can, and then you literally, whatever way you can record onto your computer, there's multiple programs that come with your computer that you can record audio files, everything.
You don't have to download the thing. And if you do want to download one, you can download them for like another $2 or something.
Yeah, super inexpensive. So whatever computer you have has the ability, even if you want to do it as a video file on your computer, if you can't figure out how to do audio. So there isn't anything that's holding you back. And Anthea is saying that it was the tech that was holding her back. And I know for a fact that she has a setup for her to do videos in her office. So I'm going to say no. No. So Roxanne is asking about a program, and it really depends on whether you have a PC or a Mac. I know on a Mac, literally you could use QuickTime,
GarageBand, voice recorder,
photo booth, even
anything.
There's so many different programs that record what you're saying. Anthea saying busted. Was your mistake.
On your phone, there's 4 million apps to record your voice.
Again, voice recorder, anything that records video. If you're on a PC, there is, again, a ton of different, I don't know them off the top of my head, but there's Audacity. There's so many ways you can record if you just literally, and there's stuff that come with your computer, or free downloads. So really very easy. But again, understanding that your recording is really one of the last things you do.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you need a hosting platform. So again, no excuses from a financial perspective. There's 2 options to go. There are free hosting platforms. There's Anchor, there's TalkShoe, there's another free one that I can't remember off the top of my head. Or there is paid ones, Podbean, Libsyn, SoundCloud. You just Google any of those. And basically what happens is you create your account and it automatically sends it to the world.
Yeah.
It automatically sends it to Google. It sends it to Apple iTunes. It sends it to Bleaker, Stitcher, Spotify, you name it. It's there. You don't have to do anything. Now,
that's crazy.
It's so, and literally, like, I know I use Anchor. I don't use all aspects of Anchor, but the simplicity of it is that it's an app. You can record it right on the app. You can press publish and boom, there's your podcast.
And it's free. Guys, free. You know how much I like free.
It's free.
It's free.
And basically, now if you want to, again, take it a little bit up level, you can do an intro and an outro.
Yeah.
So Faye and I both have intros and outros, which basically includes a mixture of music, your voice, and, where you kind of welcome people to the show and they hear a little bit about what it's going to be about. And they hear the same thing every show, so that when you start recording, you don't have to do the, hey, welcome to this show, welcome to that show. It starts it and you can literally just start recording.
And there's lots of free music too, right? Lots of free intro. Like if you actually Google intro, outro free, you'll get it. But I have an even better way. And how I got mine was I asked my kid to do it. So he was 14 at the time. And I said, I need some music. Can you just put something together for me? And he just literally we were driving in the car and he put a few clips together on some weird thing that they use. And he's like, which one do you like? And I was like, oh, I like that one. Okay. He sent it to me. I sent it to Stacy. Done. That was it.
That's perfect. So there's lots of same thing with the outro. It's the same music. That way you can jump right in and then you just edit it all together, upload it as a file, and you're done. So there isn't a lot that you need to do after the recordings. Put them together again. I go through as a producer, all the sound mixing, make sure all the volume levels are good, add the intro, outro, blah, blah, blah. So I do a lot with that, but to make it very simplistic, you don't have to.
Yeah, you don't.
You can record on your phone, upload, you're done.
But I like having a producer because Stacy gives me a link. I go on, we do it. And then I say, okay, bye.
And then I have the recordings. It's perfect.
And then it shows up. So
magically.
And, I started my first episode. I was, going to start just talking. And I was like, no, the ones I like listening to, I like when the producers jump in and talk because those are the kind of ones that I listen to, that they're not really part of the show, but they're part of the show. Yeah. So now Stacy's just on every show.
It's like I'm Roz from Frasier.
Yeah.
I love it. I love Roz.
And that's what I listen to. I like to listen to more, just social conversations that add value but they're also sometimes funny and sometimes realistic. And that's what I listen to, and that's what I wanted to do. That was the easiest way for me.
Absolutely.
So,
So I leave you with planning. So if you do want to start a podcast, again, start planning it.
Yeah.
Thinking about what you want it to call. So basically, I can't tell you the amount of people that contact me and they say, I want to do a podcast. And I'd be, okay. Now I'm happy to help people with strategy. I'm happy to send them to people who can help them with all of that stuff. But if they just want me for production, I have to tell them they're not ready.
Right.
I'm sorry, I can't work with you. You're not ready for me. You don't know anything. And then the other concept I just want to give one sort of public service announcement on is just because you decide today that you want to start a podcast does not mean that you can launch it tomorrow. You have to have at least a month. And this is after. So I'm talking about a month after you've figured out the name of your show, you know what your artwork's going to look like, you figured out your intro, you figured out your outro, your vibe of your show, all of that stuff, because it can take a couple of weeks, sometimes 3 to 4, to get approved by iTunes.
Yeah.
So just think about that piece. So if you're thinking about launching a show in September, that's why we're doing this now. We're doing it in the middle of July, so that you can start to plan the rest of July. We can get it going in August, and then we've got the week so that you can launch in September. Yeah. So you do need that lead time, because a lot of people, that's the other piece. I have people coming going, so I think I'm ready. I want to launch. I know the name of my show and I want to launch in 2 weeks. You can't. You have to be on iTunes, because 50% of podcast listeners listen via iTunes app.
I only listen to iTunes, so I'm one of them.
If you're not there, you won't be found.
No, I don't. And I never, unless if I find somebody on social media that says, hey, check me out on Spotify, then I'll go. It's not that I don't want to. It's just that my habit is just to go into the little podcast icon on your Apple.
Right. And look for one, right?
So that's what I do. And so that's where I'm going. So it's not that, Apple iTunes is any better. It's just
it's just what you're used to. And that's just the fact. I think they kind of owned that podcasting space for a really long time. And now there's lots of opportunity. You can listen on a variety of different apps.
Right.
And there's probably maybe 6 to 8 that are the most popular. Again, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, app, whatever, Google Play, which has just sort of changed some stuff. So very easy to get them out there, because a lot of these platforms do it automatically, which is really cool. So nothing to hold you back.
No, I'm wondering if any of these people are going to do podcasts in the next couple of days.
Yeah,
so
thinking about it. Yeah,
thinking about planning. I mean, again, it's the easiest thing to do is go back to see who you listen to, who do you enjoy, what would you tune into because you really like what they do. Because here's the thing: what the mistake most people make is that they know what they like, and then they go and do something totally opposite, because they think that's what's going to get them listeners. And I guess ask yourself the question, why is it that you want listeners? Right. So, if it's just to say I have a podcast, then do one episode and call it a day.
Your podcast, congratulations. Yeah, there's definitely, and it does take commitment to that. So you can do them in seasons. I have one client that just finished their season, as did I. Finished season 2. She just finished season 1. And then I'll come back out in September with season 3, which is kind of cool. So I like that aspect, because I feel like I can take a break and I'm not doing it, 365 days, weeks, whatever, 52 weeks a year.
Yeah. Sometimes it feels like 365
weeks. Exactly. So if you have any more questions, I'm just going to give it a couple more minutes. I just wanted to kind of cover some of the basics today to make people understand that there's nothing that's holding you back.
No,
in regards to getting yourself out there.
If you got a phone, you're good. And if you got a phone and a story, you need
to have something to say. That's the first thing. Like it was the same thing back when live streaming first came out. It was like, oh my goodness, I can't wait to go live.
But what are you going to do?
What are you going to say?
So just so you guys know, I had 3 different ideas before I settled on what I was doing, and I had 3 different artwork. I'd had artwork done for all 3 of the other podcasts, and I had ideas behind them too. So I knew one show what I was going to do. I knew the other show. I knew them all. But I just, and Stacy kept going, are you going to do it? Are you going to ready to record? And I'd be like, something was holding me back because it just wasn't. I wasn't feeling it, right? It wasn't like, this is what I can't wait to do this, right? And then when this Call Me Casey idea came up, I was like, oh, okay, let's do this. This is fun. So, and I didn't have any artwork ready for that one. So I had to send that off and to my lovely daughter and
exactly.
get that done. But so just so you understand, if you think you have, because everybody, I guarantee you, everyone here is probably thinking they have 10 different ideas, right? Because everybody does. So that's the cool part. Like, write them all down and try to envision it. And then, like I said, pick up that hairbrush and start talking and see which one that you can talk for more than, 10 seconds on. That's probably your winner.
Yeah. Or even just, as basic as the intro, hey, welcome to the Stacey Maynard Show. Didn't sit well with me. I kind of said it a few times out loud and I started to laugh going, this doesn't sound good.
Right.
Link for Success. I was like, ooh, I like the way I went. The way I
very,
and it just became, it became one that I loved. So I guess, so don't.
Mine doesn't sound like that. Mine says, I think, business help, relationship help, or sometimes no damn help at all.
But it's perfect.
I loved that. To me, it felt like fun. And so that was how you pick it. So I think you just have to really, I can't stress this enough. We're definitely going to do something on this going forward, but you have to understand your voice. Like, you need to know who you are before you do anything. Before you do anything, who are you? What's your voice? What's your brand? Because the truth is, I know all of you can do a million different things, but you can't get ahead if you're doing a million different things. You have to focus. You have to say, what is really my message? What do I want to stand for? What do I want to talk about? What do I want to teach? How do I want to add value? And then when you get that, you're good.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? Don't do it until those things are in place.
Right.
Don't try to launch a podcast, because guess what's going to happen is you're going to go exactly where I did, which was a failed podcast.
And it wasn't with me.
No, you just can't. It's just fascinating. So if you're not ready, if it doesn't feel right, if you don't have those things solidified, don't do it. You're not ready. And that's okay. Do it in the fall. Do it in 2021, whatever the case may be. Put it into your business plan, but make sure that it's going to work.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, that's okay.
And just, understand that you're not going to make a ton of money on this podcast. What you're going to do is you're going to get another opportunity to share your voice, to share your brand. So understand that if you know that going up into it, then remember, like, have a little fun with it, right? Like, Stacey loves doing it. She loves she loves interviewing people. She's curious. She's interested. So that makes you want to do it. I love doing it because for me, it's fun, right? We talk about the topics that I'm just thinking about at that day. And sometimes it's just Stacey just says, you want to do a podcast today? Okay. And so put on the headphones and away we go. So, you have to know yourself. And that's what I mean about knowing your voice. Like, who are you and who do you want to, what will you be excited about putting that headset on and talking about? Because if it's like a drag to do it, don't do it.
No, it's just not going to end well. And people, remember, you have to think when they're hearing your voice, you're in their head. They're wearing headphones. Most people listen to podcasts wearing headphones. So it's really an intimate experience. So if you're not enjoying what you're talking about,
whether it's a heavy topic, it could be a heavy, heavy topic, but you have to enjoy the fact that you're sharing it, you're adding value, you're reaching out, you're helping people, right? I mean, I think you guys know from joining us on Mondays and Tuesdays and Fridays, we like to do this. This is fun for us. It doesn't feel like work. it doesn't like, we're not like, oh, I have to do another live. We're like, cool, we're on soon.
What did we talk about?
So that's what you have to remember in the back of your mind, that, life's too short to not have some little bit of joy in doing what you're doing, right?
And Anthea's reminding us, which is absolutely true, that you can absolutely have multiple.
Absolutely.
You can have multiple podcasts. If it kind of, you can have one, maybe that's a partnership with somebody else. You can do one that's solo. And she's saying somebody has 6. I know I was on a podcast panel once and the guy had 3.
Right.
And one of them was, his daily walk. It was like 3 to 5 minutes long, each one. Yeah. And it was just a quick rant about whatever was popping into his head.
Yeah.
And then another one he felt like, he was doing, because it was a little bit more business focused. So we talked about business topics. And the other one, a little bit more serious, not necessarily business. It was more of the personal motivation style. And
right.
he did that with somebody else. So it's very interesting how he was able to kind of segregate himself to 3 different brands, but they all fit in together, which was kind of cool.
But start with one.
Yes.
Start with one. Because if you think, as I told you, I had 3 or 4 going, right? I could have theoretically done all of them, right? But are you really going to commit to doing all of them?
Yeah, do one, do it well. And then, because now I'm coming into season 3 of mine, now I feel if somebody were to ask me to co-host or to be part of another podcast, I feel that I could do that, but I wanted to do my own first.
Right.
And I wanted to get comfortable with everything and how it works. And the other suggestion is, if you don't have a podcast, but you want to start to practice, be a guest.
Yeah.
Guest podcasting is great.
Yeah.
You can start to get an idea of what it feels like.
Kind of like on my show. I'm a guest. Stacy sends me the link. I click the button. It's kind of like being a guest.
You just ask so many questions. You can chime in. It's all good. All right. Have a great Monday. We will see you tomorrow, same time for Tech Tuesday. The one that I have is, it's kind of cool. It's related to podcasting, but can also be used in other aspects. And it's a free,
free
thing.
Yeah.
And then on Friday, same thing. Ask us anything. So if you think about anything this week in regards to podcasting, or if you have any questions about anything else,
or if you want some ideas, if you want to share your ideas on the list, just post it and say, hey, here's the 3 I'm thinking of. What does everyone think? Yep. Start getting used to putting it out there, guys. You guys have been really shy for the last couple of weeks. And I think the more you actually put it out live on paper or on the internet, that's when you'll start moving forward. But if you just keep it to yourself, it's never going to happen.
Yes. So I know a couple of people who are on here who have it in their head that they want to do a podcast. So I'd be interested in seeing exactly, put it out there and say, like, do you like this name or that name, or after that? Start somewhere.
Thanks for joining us in the city for this episode of Master Talk. If you're ready to make a lasting impression on a global scale, you can learn more at joingia.com. That's joingia.com.
So go there now, because
the world is waiting for you.